Ball Lightning by Cixin Liu follows one man's lifelong obsession with the phenomenon of ball lightning, of excited electronic lightning floating through the sky during thunderstorms, which can be incredibly dangerous. Our main character, Dr. Shen, knows this because his parents were killed by ball lightning directly before his eyes. And so he dedicates his entire life to studying this phenomenon. And then we get a story about his investigations into this, his meeting countless other people that are also investigating this, and then eventually we lead into possible military and commercial applications of this sort of technology. And overall, I thought this book was kind of a real dud. Pretty boring, actually. Let's talk about why. So this is written by Cixin Liu, who is an author I really enjoy reading. I've only read the Remembrance of Earth Past trilogy, so that's Three Body Problem, for anyone that knows it by that name. And Dark Forest, the second book in that trilogy, is actually number 10 on my top 15 sci-fi books list that I put out, which you can see in the corner, 𝕤𝕠𝕠𝕜𝕤. So it's not like I don't like his writing, but there are issues with his writing, and they're all pretty firmly on display here in Ball Lightning. First off is, well, it's the prose, and this is where I really wish I had some sort of formal English literature training or education, because I don't know the words that I want to use to describe the prose and why it didn't work for me. It was pretty flat. It felt very scientifically descriptive rather than emotionally evocative. Because we're seeing it through first-person perspectives a lot of the time, it's, I thought this, so I told him this. He said this. That made me think this. So I told him this. And I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it here, but it was very dry prose and didn't let me connect emotionally with any of the events that were really going on. And this book is originally written in Chinese. Cixin Liu is a Chinese author. So perhaps it's the translation. The translation is done by 𝕬𝕠𝕠𝕜𝕚, who did the translation for The Dark Forest. He didn't do the translation of the other two books, but he did do the one that is my favorite of the trilogy. So while I would look back in The Dark Forest and say, yeah, the prose is a little dry there, but I feel like it's much better than it is here. And that may just come from the fact that The Dark Forest is written quite a bit after this book. There's quite a lot more time to hone the craft. But it doesn't take away from the fact that this book at times read a lot closer to a Wikipedia article than it did to an exciting novel. Like, it gave me all the information about the events that was going on, but it didn't have any of the emotive force or the beautiful prose that helps me, like, visualize what's happening and connect with it. And secondly, and the most damning bit of complaint I can probably give, I was just bored for most of the book. I wasn't invested at all in our characters, and this is something that can be said for The Dark Forest as well and the entire Three Body Problem series. Cixin Liu's character work is not fantastic. It isn't the top of the game. But those books are carried by these scientific ideas and the scope and the mind-blowing sci-fi concepts that are going on, whereas this book's concept of ball lightning and its uses ends up being a lot drier, and the bits that are the most exciting are a lot less deeply explored than a lot more of the drier concepts. So what we end up with, instead of either interesting characters or interesting ideas, we ended up with, in my opinion, dry characters exploring dry ideas without any evocative or descriptive prose to give that any excitement. And it does kind of seem like Dr. Shen just keeps running into people that are also obsessed with ball lightning. For something that is, like, told very early on that is, like, this near pseudoscience sort of level thing is presented as, he does definitely keep accidentally running into people who've dedicated their entire life to obsess over this topic just like he has, which after the nth time that happened, I was beginning to roll my eyes at it. But finally, before I jump into some spoilers, because I will be talking some spoilers later on because there's some specific moments, I just want to bring up that there's a kind of disturbing pattern here now that I've read, I think this is 4 Cixin Liu books, and that's that a reoccurring motif, a reoccurring event in these books seems to be that a woman acts emotionally because she's a woman and that screws everything up. I feel like that has happened like a handful of times, maybe more than a handful of times across these books. And once it's a coincidence, 2, 3 times is a pattern. And it's beginning to feel a little bit iffy to me and making me question whether I want to keep reading Cixin Liu, if that's just going to be what we keep getting. If I'm to be expected that that's the sort of pattern, then I'm not super interested in that. But let's talk spoilers for a second. Jump to this timestamp. Hopefully I've remembered to put that in. to see my final thoughts and ratings, but I want to talk some spoilers. First off, I did mention that I think Dark Forest and the Three Body Problem series gets carried by its big sci-fi ideas. This book contains what might be the biggest of all those ideas, but it barely gets touched on, and that is the idea of this macro universe, the idea that these ball lightnings are electrons, and then we find protons and neutrons, and we find out that, that's an atom, and our entire universe might exist miniaturized inside a giant universe. If this is the scope of one atom, imagine how big the macro universe must be, and what's there? What sort of matter exists there? Is there life there? That is such a huge concept. That has stuck in my mind, but it hasn't stuck in any of the characters' minds, it seems. They figure it out, kind of explore the sort of earth-shattering ramifications of this, and then the book rarely touches on it again, as we just kind of go back to the military aspects of ball lightning and the sort of war that's coming and all that sort of stuff, which is disappointing because as soon as we got to that bit and that revelation, I perked up. I was like, oh, this book might be going somewhere super interesting now. And it just didn't. I feel like if ball lightning started with that revelation that the ball lightnings are electrons and did that in like the first third, and then the rest of the book was exploring that, then that's super cool, but we don't really touch on it. And touching a bit on the idea that this is kind of a prequel to the Three Body Problem, which I'll talk about in a bit because I don't really think it is. The idea of a macro universe has huge implications for everything that goes on in that trilogy as well. And that could have been really interesting to think about. But unfortunately, we just don't explore it as much as I would have liked. And yes, getting back to that, technically this does kind of happen in the same universe as the Three Body Problem. Dr. Chen and the ball lightning stuff is mentioned in that first book. But there's no real connection here. There's no narrative force that carries from this book to those. There's no characters that really reappear and matter. Calling this a prequel to Three Body Problem is just so disappointing because I know I've seen it online and I've seen it in my own comment section. There are people who read Ball Lightning because they were excited to read Three Body Problem, but they read that this is a prequel, so they'll read that first. And then they read this, didn't enjoy it, and never got to Three Body Problem. So I think anyone describing this like that is doing the Three Body Problem especially a disservice and might be losing it some readers. And while we're talking spoilers, there are several moments in this book that made me question if I'd read the book correctly, because narratively, it just kind of seemed to fall through a plot hole. For example, all our characters are on a military base researching ball lightning. The colonel in charge of this base is in all these meetings. He knows what they're doing. He knows they're researching ball lightning. Blah-de-blah-de-blah. We move on a bit. We go away a bit. We come back and we learn that there might have been an attack by ball lightning on a Chinese hotel several years ago. We come back and we ask the colonel, and the colonel goes, oh yeah, of course I know about that. I know about the ball lightning attack on the hotel. Here's all the information. If he knew about that, why didn't he ever share that during all these meetings where we were talking about ball lightning and possible military applications, whether it exists and all that sort of stuff? Secondly, Lin Yun's mother is killed by a next generation weapon, right? That's kind of what spurs Lin Yun's whole career path into next generation weaponry, or new concept weaponry, I think. And we really do explore how that affected Lin Yun emotionally, how it changed their life, and finding out who was responsible and the reactions to that. And all of that is probably the best bit of the book for me. It is written with emotion. It has a character that suddenly seems to have feelings and likes and interests outside of science. Unfortunately, and this is probably just me, the new concept weapon is bees. And I just couldn't get out of my head that Oprah gif of bees, everyone gets bees. And so coming from this like high concept sci-fi of like lightning guns and like giant electrons and stuff, and then like the biggest emotional moment in the book for me being about bees was a bit of a whiplash. And again, that's just me because I couldn't get away from that image of bees being kind of funny. Welcome back if you skipped the spoilers. So yeah, look, as a wrap up, this was a flop for me. There is a coldness to this book that doesn't come off as purposeful, just kind of comes off as, yeah, like reading a Wikipedia article at times. And that's not what I'm here for. Every character and event is just sort of described at you rather than ever feeling like I as a reader have an emotional investment in this story, or I'm being described events that are happening concurrently that are important in some way to me. The entire story seems to take place at like arm's length, and even our characters who are in the middle of this story seem very emotionally disinterested in it. Even when the stakes are really high, they don't seem to react in ways that make me feel that those stakes are high. And I know Cixin Liu writes high concept sci-fi ideas over character-driven stories. That's very, very clear from the Three Body Problem. But if your characters are dry and cardboard, as they are here, you need something to grab onto that is interesting. You need something to grab onto that keeps the reader engaged the entire time. And in the Three-Body Problem, that's the giant sci-fi ideas. In The Dark Forest and in Death's End, that's the scope and the scale and the mind-blowing implications of everything that's going on. Here, it's just kind of dry, sciencey, pseudo-sciencey stuff that doesn't really have an impact on me. Theoretically, this is a deeply personal story about a man following his lifelong obsession, following the thing that destroyed his family, throwing his life away into this research. This should be a darkly emotional book, but it just isn't. And so while I still think Cixin Liu is a great writer because I adore the Three-Body Problem books, which I think are actually over here. I've been pointing over there the whole time, but yeah, they're over here. Ball Lightning really didn't work for me. Ball Lightning is going to get a 2 out of 10 from me. And if you are at all considering reading it because you think it's a prequel to the Three-Body Problem, I would say absolutely don't. I spoke about this in the spoiler section, but they technically happen in the same universe, but not reading Ball Lightning will not in any way affect your enjoyment of Three-Body Problem. There is like half a shared character, and it's kind of just a reference rather than anything like that. It doesn't matter at all. And reading Ball Lightning, I think, might negatively affect your enjoyment of the Three-Body Problem because you might just never get to it if you think that this is what all of Cixin Liu's writing is like. So there you go. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Let me know in the comments below if you've read other works by Cixin Liu. I was kind of excited to get to the Supernova Generation and Wandering Earth stories, but after this, I'm a little bit iffy on it now. I'm not sure I want to. Let me know if you've read those, if you think they're closer to the Three-Body Problem or closer to Ball Lightning, and which way you think I might go on them. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your support. Thank you so much to the channel members that have joined. I can't thank you enough. That is huge. It lets me keep making videos like this. It lets me keep buying books. I already have too many books, but it lets me keep buying more. And I just adore talking to everyone in the comments below. Make sure to keep reading, and ciao.